Welcome to the November 18th meeting of the Virginia Board of Education. We'll begin with a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, board members, I hope you've had a chance to review the minutes from the October 20 and 21 meetings of the board. Is there a motion to approve those minutes or amend them?
So moved.
To approve as drafted?
To approve as drafted.
Dr. Ron, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Public comment. Speakers will be recognized in the order in which their request was received. Speakers are asked to limit their remarks to 3 minutes. When your time is up, please close your remarks promptly. We ask that you provide your name and affiliation at the beginning of your remarks. Speakers may provide copies of their comments. You may email a copy of your remarks to Emily Webb, Director of Board Relations, after you finish speaking. I will also note it is the practice of the board not to respond to individual comments here. However, there is staff follow-up on all comments. So first up is Ann Tatus, and forgive me if I get the pronunciations incorrect.
Perfect.
We do the best we can, and we don't mean to be rude about it, so you feel free to correct me.
Yep, you're right on it.
Good morning.
Good morning. So you have to excuse my disorganization. We had 400 pages of FOIA that 3,000 parents worked on come through last night. So what I originally intended to speak on became a conundrum at about 5 a.m. So I'm going to jump right in to say that I am with Chesterfield County. I'm a Chesterfield, very loud Chesterfield County parent. We are currently attempting to recall Dot Heffron and Catherine Haynes. And so first, I have a problem with Tim Kaine's wife being up here due to the fact that it is not public knowledge that as a Democratic senator for the United States, that she is on this board. And as this picture shows, his tight friend Catherine Haynes, pictured with Tim Kaine, is a direct conflict of interest. So as we discuss equity, I'm going to bring up the famous book by Ibram Kendi. So everyone who wants to talk about, is CRT in our schools? Yes, it is. Because if you follow the definition of what's the problem with being not racist, it's a claim that signifies neutrality. I am not racist, but neither am I aggressively against racism. So the belief that I have taught my children to see all color, to love all people until you are given a reason not to, is no longer good enough. I have to teach my children to aggressively seek something based on their color that 100% is a political agenda, just like the transgender children have been, all children through this transgender mandate that you were made responsible of. You had the buck passed to you, which legislation should not have done, because you are not elected, you are an appointed body by Northam and McAuliffe. So how in the world are we supposed to expect that any fairness in being done for these transgender children when these policies are based on divisiveness? My history before I had to fight for my own children was in CPS, Virginia being one of the dirtiest CPS systems because there is no state oversight. These transgender children are the number one, 25 times more likely to be in the child sex industry in Virginia, in the Spotsylvania corridor, right there off 95. And so tell me how removing parental responsibility benefits these transgender children, which is what these transgender mandates have fought to do. Because when these parents say, I don't want my child to have gender reassignment, or I don't want my child to have puberty blockers. You have given the door to be opened for these transgender children to now have their CPS come in and remove these children. Who's going to take care of these children? Are you? Are the schools that have fought for these children? No. CPS is going to come in and remove them. And these children who have not only had A, B, and C, the biggest fight in their brain of their lives, you have now made them a political agenda where they can not naturally, because 99 to 89% of these children by puberty will have normally and in history figured their way out of it if provided proper skills and proper ability. But no, you have locked them into identifying as a transgender. You have locked them into it. So I will submit all of this to you, but the evidence that, like I said, is overwhelming. And I petitioned to have 5 minutes as I represent 3,000 parents, not just one parent, but nobody responded to me this morning. So thank you.
Chris Dovey. I don't see any either. Jennifer Peterson.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address this board. My name is Jennifer Peterson. I am the chapter leader for No Left Turn in Education Fredericksburg Regional Chapter, which is a 503c3 organization. I live in Spotsylvania County, and I'm here to address the sexually explicit books the majority of our school board chose not to address due to policy. The current policy is that a parent can challenge any book. However, parents do not have access to children's school libraries, and these books never should have been permitted to begin with. One example of many that I would like to read to you is Like a Love Story. It's a first passage. He looks at me, taking in my body. I guide him on top of me, feel his hardness. He wants to have sex, but I tell him I'm not ready. Maybe next time. Next time, I ask? He thrusts against me until he is done, and he collapses his head on my breast. The next passage. He kisses me, his tongue exploring every inch of my mouth, his body grinding against mine, hot and sweaty. He's hard, and I am too. He turns me onto my back, positioning himself over top me so his hardness rubs against mine. He whispers my name into his ear. I whisper his name until our names cease to have meaning, sounding more like moans than anything else. He thrusts faster and faster until my name becomes more scream than moan. I turn on a shower, take my clothes off, get inside. As I touch myself, imagining Art thrusting on top of me, screaming my name. And another passage from this book. I wrap my legs around him, pulling him closer to me or deeper into me because he's in me now. We thrust and grunt and sweat until we almost fall off the bed. And here's a second example of this type of material in our schools. But now we are both touching each other. Tried my best not to enjoy it because you were my cousin and we were crossing a line that families shouldn't cross. You told me to take off my pajama pants, which I did. You then took off your shorts, followed by your boxers. You stood in front of me fully erect and said, taste it. At first I laughed and refused, but you said, come on, Matt, taste it. This is what boys like us do when we like each other. I finally listened to you. You got down on your knees. You told me to close my eyes, and that's when you began to have oral sex on me as well. You then laid me on the ground, got on top of me, began humping me. You got up off me and told me to come to the bathroom. You began stroking yourself in front of me, and then you began to moan slightly, ejaculating into the toilet. Another passage. I got behind him. For the first few minutes, we dry humped and grinded. I was behind him with my stomach on his back as we kissed. After a few minutes, he got up, went to his nightstand, and pulled out a condom with some lube. He laid down on his stomach. I knew what I had to do, even if I had never done it before. I had one point of reference, though, and that was the 7+ years of watching porn. I remember the condom was blue and flavored like cotton candy. I put on some lube, got him up on his knees, and began to slide into him from behind. I eased him slowly. I heard him moan. I finally came and let out a loud moan to the point where he asked me to quiet down for the neighbors. And the last passage. He told me to lie down on his bed. He asked me to turn over when he slipped a condom on himself. This is a fear with most things that you're doing for the first time, but this was my ass, and I was struggling to imagine somebody inside of me, and he was big. I implore this school or this VA DOE to put forth a policy that doesn't even allow these books to ever make it to the bookshelves. Parents do not have the time nor the access to be able to go into our school libraries, read the thousands of offerings, and determine whether or not that they would be appropriate. And even that has to go up to a review board. These kids cannot even search the term breast cancer because it could return an inappropriate result. An alarming amount of our school district's teachers and librarians spoke out in Spotsylvania last Monday to retain these sexually explicit books that go into detailed descriptions of rape, incest, oral, and anal sex in our libraries. This is highly inappropriate. Thank you very much.
Michael Messina. Nancy DeFranco.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Wow, that was a lot. Wow, I had no idea. Originally, I was going to tell you things that you guys already know and have access to, like Jacobson versus Massachusetts and the fact that the experimental shot no longer meets the 4 criteria set forth by the justices. And I was going to cite statistics on the children's natural immunity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there is a case that the FDA approved emergency use authorization for a vaccine to fight a fever in a different country. And the results were devastating. And I've had it and I've now lost it, and I will send it to you. But no, this morning I came to ask you why we would even consider putting this vaccine on the immunization list. There are no 2 or 3 year clinical trials. The CDC has been caught lying this week on their, I'm sorry, I'm so nervous and I'm so passionate about this, okay? We're gonna hurt our kids. You guys are responsible for these children, all the children, especially the ones that are not gonna have a voice. And unfortunately, that's gonna be our lower income kids whose parents do not have a choice but to leave them in school and follow the vaccines.
Yes, ma'am.
I am imploring you. God sent me here today and before and everywhere I've gone to ask you to do the right thing. We are putting idols before God. God asks us to protect the children. Money and power are idols, and they have become way horrible things in our country. You guys have to stand up to this. We will all back you up. Every parent in this state will back you up, and you will be the heroes for the children. We have to not do this. A year from now, they don't even get sick from COVID. They don't carry it. This is just, I know you guys are in the process with the Department of Health in making this decision, and I'm sorry that they did this to you, that you guys have to decide. But you guys have to stand up. These are our kids. These are our grandkids. These are our great-grandkids. We don't know what is going to happen with this vaccine. We know that they could get heart disease, so they put some medicine into the vaccine. The first round of the vaccine is not going to be what anybody thinks it is, because they need the results to be able to say to you and to us that it's safe, and it's not safe. So if anything, let's delay our decision. Let's wait until the first round and the start of the second round and then make that decision. They've lied to all of us. They've tricked us, and they think we're stupid and we're not going to stand up for ourselves. You guys have the authority. You have the power, and I am imploring you to do the right thing. Thank you.
Jennifer Gruber.
Good morning. Thank
morning.
you for allowing me to speak. I'm a parent and I'm in Henrico, and I'm also a citizen. So I wanted to speak. Annie Elizabeth Bessie Delaney lived from September 3rd, 1891 to September 25th, 1995. She was the first Black female dentist in New York. A trailblazer who grew up in North Carolina and moved to Harlem as an adult, she operated her own dental practice in New York. After working so hard to obtain a dental degree into practice, she retired from dentistry at the height of her career. And why? To care for her aged mother, who worked so hard to raise her and her other 9 siblings. When another person asked her credulously, how could you give up your career in dentistry after all the racial discrimination you experienced to care for your mother? She answered, you wouldn't understand because you didn't have my mother. I share this because for me, it exemplifies the value of having a strong parent in our lives, of the value of parents and what we can do for our children. The fact that this strong-willed, bright woman would stop working as a dentist to care for her mother It shows the level of respect that she had for her mother. I approached the Virginia Board of Education today to reiterate the importance of a parent in a child's life. God has partnered with man and woman to create life. The state assists parents with educating our children, but the government, it cannot replace a parent. It can't, and I want to warn the government, please do not seek to replace parents and undermine our role. That you are trespassing on our natural relationship with our parent, first established in the Ten Commandments, with honor your father and your mother. At the end of the day, parents are responsible for raising our children to learn a trade, to be a good person, and to be a good citizen. You may aid us in this endeavor, but you should not think you can replace us. Furthermore, their health and well-being is ultimately in God's hands and in our hands. It's not your place to issue mandates, especially vaccine mandates, that would supersede our God-given parental authority. Every individual is unique, and it is the right for each family to determine what is best for their child. Thank you.
Thank you. Trey Anderson? Go on back. Then Chris Dovey?
Hello, everybody. Chris Dovey, Executive Director of Code VA. Members of the Board of Education, Mr. Chairman, Superintendent Lane, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm here to speak enthusiastically in favor of the VDOE's proposed data science pathways as a key element of the revision of the Virginia Math Standards of Learning. I am not alone in my endorsement of the plan to provide Virginia students with not only an introduction to data science, but a pathway of high school courses focused on this essential and increasingly important field of mathematics and computer science. I spoke this week with a colleague at the National Security Agency. She expressed appreciation for Virginia once again taking the lead and setting a precedent among other states by implementing essential updates to our commitment to STEM education and workforce development. Notably, the NSA is the nation's largest employer of mathematicians. I would share the exact number of mathematicians, but the NSA indicated I might not see my family again. It's classified. As you consider data science, remember Virginia was the first in the nation to adopt mandatory computer science standards of learning, and also led the way in adopting, as a part of those standards, a specific cybersecurity strand. This forward-thinking focus on cybersecurity is much copied now by other states, including our neighbor and friendly rival for tech cyber jobs, Maryland. Data science is a critical field to study not only for the NSA and an educational requirement for roughly 20 different career disciplines within the agency, but also for many other career fields that comprise an important part of Virginia's economy. Data science is how banking is done. It is crucial to Virginia's financial industry leaders like Capital One and the Federal Reserve, who rely on data scientists the way that they once relied on traditional statisticians. And then there's NASA and NOAA, from aerospace to agriculture and every industry in between, who rely on data science to drive innovation. But why data science for all? We know data science and computer science deepen understandings of mathematics and create stronger connections for students across grade levels and content areas by exposing students to data science concepts earlier. And as we've done with computer science, infused throughout other curricular areas, it becomes accessible. Every student can use this powerful tool, this compelling storytelling device, to make essential connections, deepening understanding in nearly any subject. And by doing so, more students and more diverse students who otherwise might not be interested in math may find themselves motivated to use data science in their lives and careers. If students are able to use data to create computer models that simulate the ideas of liberty how they spread through the British American colonies and led to our independence, and yes, it's absolutely possible in an 8th grade social studies class, aren't they much more likely to be engaged in history and civics? Or by using sports data to debate who's the greatest NBA three-point shooter, aren't I also that more excited about math as, dare I dream, fun? On behalf of Code VA and the future data scientists of Virginia, and on behalf of our Commonwealth's technology sector, which includes every sector of Virginia's economy, thank you again for your time and for your leadership on this issue.
Thank you. Mike?
Good morning, board members. My name is Mike Messina. I'm a Hanover County resident, father of 2 students. I want you to imagine for a moment how you would feel if you went out to dinner with your family and you wanted to do a healthy meal and come to find out that there was something toxic in the food that you ate. You came home, one of your family members was injured, another one may have even passed away. You would be livid, you would be upset, beyond shadow of a doubt, concerned. Today, this is what many people are experiencing in regards to the COVID-19 vaccinations. I'm here today to express my opposition toward considering adding this vaccination to the regularly scheduled vaccine program for students in the state of Virginia. There are many reasons why this is a bad decision. I'm going to go through as many of them as time will allow. Number one, the VAERS database and the information found upon it is staggering. As of November 5th of this year, there have been the following incidents reported: 10,981 who have suffered from cerebral palsy, 9,094 heart attacks, 2,887 miscarriages, 12,131 episodes of myocarditis and pericarditis, and actually you can break down the chart in there. It shows around 950 of those are children between the ages of 12 and 18. In case you're not aware, the VAERS database is a database maintained by the CDC in partnership with the FDA. So this is a federally mandated database. These numbers are extremely alarming. There's actually even a Harvard study that indicates that self-reporting of this information could be as low as 1%. So even if it's 10%, these numbers are ridiculously high. Also, the numbers of incidents for COVID-19 have far surpassed all other vaccines since the beginning of this database reporting system back in 1990. Number two, the immunity of children to COVID-19. By this time, many people throughout our state, including many children, have contracted COVID at one form or another, whether it be a major symptom or minor, and many have built up natural antibody. In fact, there was a study recently, August of this year, in Israel that had a couple of interesting statistics I wanted to share. First off, the risk of developing symptomatic COVID-19 was 27 times higher among the vaccinated, and the risk of hospitalization 8 times higher. Secondly, there was also, they noted in the study that never infected people who were vaccinated in January and February were in June, July, and the first half of August 6 to 13 times more likely to get infected than the unvaccinated. According to another study, it shows that children who have gotten COVID recover at a 99.995% rate of recovery. I have many more pieces of information, but my time is up. I'll be sure to email this to you guys so you can review it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Try again for Tria Anderson. See that? Okay, that covers the list of people who have signed up in advance. Is there anybody else who is here who would like to address the board? If not, although I said at the beginning of this that we rarely comment or we don't comment on speakers, I would like to tell you that to the best of my knowledge, this board has got no authority over the issue of vaccines, nor are there any plans that I'm aware of to bring that issue before this board. I'm not sure where the idea is coming from that we have input in that particular item, but like I said, to the best of my knowledge, we haven't been asked, and I'm not aware of any plans to ask us for our opinion on that particular topic.
Can I comment on where that came from?
Actually, yes, I'd like to know, if you don't mind, if you could keep it brief.
My name's Ann Tatus from Chesterfield.
One of the reasons we don't comment is because we just don't want to engage in debate with citizens.
I understand. I was notified yesterday by several parents that the HB 1090 C19 rumor was flying around social media. And so I called several, actually, epidemiologists in Chesterfield County here, and finally had the director of communications call me back to clarify, and I tried to spread the word as far and wide as I could so that we could focus on what was to be adjusted. But that's where that came from, is that somebody found an article and ran with the mainstream media narrative that it was, and I did everything in my power to clarify that C-19 and HB 1090 had nothing to do with each other. And apparently I was not able to fart because I believe that we should all speak on what is relevant. And so I did try to clarify yesterday for everybody in Virginia that rumor went out to, but that's where it started, and that's where you're seeing this come in now. And so I just wanted to clarify that
I appreciate that.
I did
And I
everything in my power.
I will say
yesterday
that the
to try to
board and I
clarify.
have no objection to hearing what any parent or frankly, any citizen wants to talk about. That's, as long as it's tangentially at least related to education, but it is one that y'all ought to be aware that it's just not our purview. So we're gonna,
Can I ask a question? Can I ask you a question? So you guys are the main body. You guys are the leaders in education, okay? So you have a responsibility. Whether I talked to the Department of Health and they told me that you did have a voice in this, okay? So there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of bills, there's a lot of laws, there's a lot of mandated given powers. My point to you is that you do have authority. You do need to speak to this. You need to look into your hearts and you need to say what is right for the kids of our state. That's your job.
Okay, thank you for the comments. As I said, that is one reason, we're not going to debate this, but I will tell you that it is not within our purview as a board. The Constitution doesn't give us that right, nor has the legislature given us that right at this point. So we will move on with public comment closed. Next item is the consent agenda, items A through C. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda as drafted, or is there a desire to pull one or more of those items?
President Gecker, I move to approve the consent agenda as provided.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Mann. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that carries. Item D, final review of the proposed stage of the regulatory action to amend the regulations establishing standards for the accreditation of public schools in Virginia.
Good morning, President Gecker, members of the board, Dr. Lane. I feel quite certain I've reached my quota for presentation time this year, so I will keep this one pretty brief. Before you all this morning is the final review of the proposed stage of the regulatory action to amend the regulations establishing the standards of accreditation for public schools in Virginia, also commonly known as the standards of accreditation. As you all well know, the amendments before you are the product of the board's special committee for the review of standards of accreditation, part of their considerations being recommendations to come from the Virginia Department of Education's SOA Implementation Committee. The edits before you, or the amendments and package before you, also include edits to address discussion that occurred at the October board meeting. And with that, I feel that we have a complete and comprehensive package before you all today to consider for final review for the proposed stage. The superintendent's recommendation is to have the board approve these recommendations. And again, recognizing that this is the proposed stage of the regulatory action, so this will return to the board for final approval.
Okay, so you want us to approve them today?
The proposed stage
That's
of the regulations, yes.
All right, are there any comments on this? And thank you, Doctor.
Just one.
Please.
So just a comment and an acknowledgement of all of the work that the staff and this board has been undertaking over the last, I don't even know how many months, and the various iterations. And so thank you for bringing us to this point, recognizing that there's still an opportunity for comment. And so thank you, Dr. Sale.
Absolutely.
Dr. Duran.
I also would like to thank Dr. Anderson for her leadership in this, the committee work that was done. I think I appreciated the very thoughtful, organized manner, remember back to the beginning, and the opportunity to hear from various stakeholders related to this. And you brought forth panels of individuals who shared with us what was working and some concerns. and you help steer us and keep us focused. And certainly, I really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to voting for this and think that it's a movement forward to continue holding our schools accountable, making sure all of our students are successful, but at the same time, looking at those areas where I think we needed a little bit of revision. So thank you, Dr. Anderson.
Dr. Mann.
I concur with all that's been said, and actually, I think it would be helpful for the edification of the record to articulate with this next stage where there is going to be opportunity for public input in what's being proposed here. So I always think it's good where we can be explicit about those opportunities as they exist so that we can continue to educate our constituents on those opportunities.
Absolutely. And
Please.
do you want me to go ahead and speak to that?
Is that okay?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. After the board's approval here today, the next phase of the regulatory action will be executive review, part of which is a public comment period. So that will be available via town hall, where members of the public can provide comment and read the full proposed amendments and give feedback to the board, at which point the staff will be able to reflect on that input and feedback and make any amendments necessary if there are amendments to be made. And the board will have the opportunity to hear this again twice more as first review and final review as part of the final stage of the regulatory action. And following that, there is another opportunity for public comment. So there will be several other opportunities for the public to engage with this work.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anybody else? I would also like to thank Dr. Anderson for the work on this. I know when we started this project, which is, the review, people were saying, or, some thought, why are we doing this so early? Because we had really just adopted the new standards. And I think as a matter of practice for this board to continue to go back every few years and look at the impact of what we have done, what impact it has had in the field and where we can improve it is a good practice for us to be engaged in. And certainly, I don't think anybody could have led that effort better than you, Dr. Anderson. So thank you very much. Is there a motion then to approve this?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. I guess that project went on so long you changed names. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Item E, final review of the 2021 annual report on the conditions and needs of public schools in Virginia. Ms. Webb.
Good morning, President Gecker, Vice President Wilson, members of the board, and Dr. Lane. I'm pleased to present for final review the board's 2021 annual report on the conditions and needs of public schools in Virginia. This report is required by the Virginia Constitution and the Code of Virginia. The code outlines the requirements for the report, including the current standards of quality, information on student and parent choice, as well as a report on the required data and reports that local school divisions must submit to the state or federal government. The annual report presents the conditions and needs of public education in Virginia and provides an update on the board's work over the past year. Much of the report focuses on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on public education and the board's work on the standards of quality, standards of accreditation, and early childhood care and education. As I reviewed with you during yesterday's work session, there have been several updates to the report since first review. An executive summary has been added, additional research and information has been added to the staffing challenges section. A section has been added on the impact of principal leadership and support for new teachers. A section has been added on the academic outcomes on national assessments, as well as on the environment surrounding public education and the board's role and authority. More information has been added to the board's noteworthy action sections, and additional information will be added to that section following this meeting. And throughout the document, several technical and editorial updates have been made based on feedback and comments from the board. Additionally, the board's SOQ prescriptions have been weaved in throughout the document, and all of the required reports and the appendices have been added and finalized. The version before you today does not include edits discussed during yesterday's work session, but those will be made following today's meeting. Following board approval and any technical and editorial updates by staff based on board feedback, and another review by President Gecker and Dr. Wilson, the report will be submitted to the Governor and General Assembly by December 1st. The Superintendent of Public Instruction recommends that the Board of Education approve the 2021 Annual Report on the Conditions and Needs of Public Schools in Virginia.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Webb. All right, we had this, as you know, a work session yesterday, so it's been pretty well discussed. Are there any other comments or corrections, additions that anybody would like to make? I will say that, as I've said now, I guess for all the years I've been doing this, this and the comprehensive plan to me are the two documents that speak most to the philosophy and the work of the board. And so I think it's particularly important that this document actually reflect, what we as a consensus believe, because this is what we transmit to the legislature in particular to say, this is what we need for public education to be successful in the Commonwealth. And so I appreciate greatly the fact that all of you have had comments on the drafts. And particularly appreciate the patience of Ms. Webb dealing with all of us and the various emails and meetings to discuss, where this comma goes and where this one shouldn't be.
We're still working that out sometimes.
Yeah. The moral of that story is I'm always wrong on the commas. So in any event, I'd be happy to entertain a motion to adopt this as the board's 2021 annual report on the conditions and needs of public schools in Virginia, subject to technical corrections done by staff in the interim that is between this and transmission, and the final review by myself and Dr. Wilson. Is there a motion?
With thanks to Ms. Webb, President Gecker, I move that we adopt the final report, annual report on conditions and needs of public schools in Virginia.
Subject to editorial.
Subject to editorial changes and updates, yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
I heard Dr. Davis-Vaught, thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Yeah, thanks very much, Emily. You did a great job on this. Okay, item F, final review of notice of intended regulatory action to the background checks for child daycare programs and family day systems regulations. Ms. Conway.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I am pleased on behalf of the superintendent to submit for final review for a notice of intended regulatory action for background checks for child day programs and family day systems. So this chapter describes the background check requirements and procedures to implement and provide standards for ensuring that our persons who are working in childcare and family day home programs have the background checks. They have not been convicted of offense that prohibits licensure, registration, approval, or employment. We need to thoroughly and comprehensively review and update this chapter to make it consistent with all federal laws and codes, as well as to make adjustments now that we have portability, which means that you can move from one program to another. You can create substitute pools. And we request that you approve this notice of intended regulatory action on the background checks, in large part because this is highly sensitive. We've got the new requirement coming in January, and we also are facing real challenges, as I described yesterday, to staffing across the Commonwealth. So the superintendent of public instruction recommends that the Board of Education approve the NORA for background checks for child day programs and family day systems.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions by the board? I don't see any, and again, we're at a point in this process where there will be significant opportunity for public
Absolutely.
input as it moves through. This is just the initiation of the regulatory action. So, that in mind, is there a motion to adopt this?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Dr. Duran. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That carries. Item G, Ms. Conway, final review of notice of intended regulatory action to the general procedures and information for licensure regulations.
So similar to the preceding item, we need to open the process. So this chapter are the general procedures and information for licensure. It's a rather lengthy regulation that describes all the processes, for licensure for all child day programs licensed by the Virginia Department of Education, including family day systems. So it's how do you get a license, terms of licenses, the application process, and all of the things that are included as part of the inspection and enforcement practices. This one, similar to the one before, will involve extensive engagement with the field, starting with our Early Childhood Advisory Committee, the duly representative group set forth in the law that advises this body. And we are creating a task force with that group, as well as with a broad set of stakeholders to systematically go through every aspect of the regulation before bringing it to. So there will be plenty of opportunity for constituents and provider groups to add in public comment here. So we recommend that you approve this NORA for general procedures and information for licensure.
Thank you, Ms. Conway. Are there any questions or comments? If not, is there a motion to approve the NORA as presented?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Excellent. I promise you this will be the shortest conversation that you ever have on childcare licensure. So we will take that with a grain of salt, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, item H, final review of notice of intended regulatory action to develop regulations for human research. Dr. Pavarena. Good morning.
Good morning, President Gecker, members of the board, and Dr. Lane. I'm presenting item H on your agenda, final review of a NORA to develop regulations for human research. Section 22.1-16.1 of the Code of Virginia requires the Board of Education to establish regulations regarding human research conducted by the Department of Education. These regulations require development of a human research committee, which is further defined in Virginia Code as a committee that performs competent, complete, and professional review of human research activities prior to any research being conducted or authorized. While our current process ensures that all externally generated research activities have been reviewed by an institutional review board at an accredited organization, typically a university, we have a growing portfolio of research studies that are led by staff internal to the agency that now also require review. As part of the process of developing regulations, we will examine policies and processes at other Virginia state agencies that have similar requirements in code and have established IRBs. We will also examine opportunities for formal partnerships with existing IRBs to create this new capacity at the department as efficiently as possible, while prioritizing the rights and welfare of individuals involved in research. The Superintendent of Public Instruction recommends that the board approve the NORA for the development of regulations to establish an institutional review board at the DOE.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Let me just ask it, just because, so many people who watch us and the phrase human research sounds so ominous. Could you describe what types of research would be implicated by this?
I certainly could. Typically, we're thinking about things like surveys, other types of human subjects research. And when we're thinking in education, we're typically thinking about students or teachers. So it could be survey work. It could be an evaluation of a program. There is language in the code that specifically excludes things like regular testing of students, assessments, those kinds of things. So it typically is above and beyond your typical day-to-day data collection in classrooms.
Okay, so basically any data collection and analysis that involves students or teachers or humans. It is not we're not conducting laboratory experiments on.
No.
Okay, just
No.
Can't be too clear right now. Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
President Gecker, I think you answered the one question I had, and as I read the information, it seemed that because VDOE is doing its own research, that really precipitated the need for this, because I was curious about what triggered the need to create the department's own institutional review board. So thank you for addressing that in your comments.
Okay, then is there a motion to approve the NORA as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, first review, item I, first review of the cultural competency training for teachers and other licensed school board employees in Virginia Public Schools as required by House Bill 1904 and Senate Bill 1196. Dr. Atkins and Assistant Superintendent Coy.
Good morning, President Gecker, Vice President Dr. Wilson, board members, and Dr. Lane. Good morning. This morning, we bring before you the first review of the culturally competency training for school board employees in public schools in Virginia, as required by House Bill 1904 and Senate Bill 1196. The proposal supports the priorities and goals of the Board of Education for providing high-quality, effective learning environments for all students and sets forth the minimum guidance for professional learning for employees. There are 3 areas in which the board has been asked to address: that each school board shall adopt and implement policies that require each teacher and any licensed personnel issued by the Virginia Department of Education to complete cultural competency training at least every 2 years, and that no later than December 31st, 2021, that the Board of Education issue guidance that establishes minimum standards for the training, and that each school board employee who holds a license in the Commonwealth of Virginia complete at least one such training in cultural competency no later than the start of the 22-23 school year. Now we'll go over some of those details.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. Good morning, President Gecker and members of the board. As Dr. Atkins mentioned, this fulfills a part of the legislation that was passed last year. You will remember that there were 4 components to that bill, and this only addresses the requirement for the local training to occur. It was created with the intention of aligning with the revised guidelines for uniform performance standards for evaluation of teachers, which was updated by this body last spring to include a new standard. Information and conversations with public education stakeholders and a variety of divisions informed the approach of the guidance as well. You'll note that the guidance lays out minimum content standards for the local training. It includes a definition of cultural competency, as this was not defined in the legislation, on page 3. The guidance goes on to provide a framework with 4 domains of cultural competency. Within each of those, it provides micro competencies to be covered within the locally required training. Those start on page 5 of the document. Finally, I will just note that the guidance does not prescribe specific curricula, vendors, or methods of delivering the training. It leaves that in the hands of local school divisions so that they might adopt policies and training that best suit the needs of their staff and community. Divisions may, at their own discretion, go beyond the minimum content standards outlined in this guidance document or require other staff, other than those licensed by the Board of Ed, to participate in such trainings. We'll be happy to answer any questions as you consider the guidance before you.
Okay, members of the board, are there any questions? Mr. Swan.
Yes, thank you so much for working on this. The required trainings for every 2 years, is that going to be a local decision as well?
Yes, sir. So the legislation requires this body to issue the minimum standards for that training, and then the local divisions will need to adopt local policies on how they envision that being fulfilled at the local level.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up question. Those districts who have no clue about what cultural competency is, how will we support them in providing that local training if they have no clue or what direction to go?
We're currently working with some of our university partners to develop training and with some of the local partners to further that training. So that will be made available to all of our school divisions.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? Okay, I would note that the legislature actually required the board to adopt guidelines on or before December 31st, 2021. So that although this matter is technically before us on first review, if we are to meet the legislative mandate, it would be appropriate to go to waive first review and move to final review today. I don't know if there's a sentiment to do that on the board, but I'm certainly willing to entertain a motion to waive first review and adopt the guidelines as drafted.
I'll make a motion to waive first review and adopt the guidance as
Thank you,
outlined.
Dr. Duran. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Davis-Vaught. Is there any discussion on that issue? If not, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries. Thank you. Thank you both very much. All right, item J, first review of the proposed data science standards of learning and data science standards of learning curriculum framework.
Good morning, President Gecker, Vice President Wilson, Superintendent Lane, esteemed members of the Board of Education. My name is Tina Mazzacay, and I'm the K-12 Mathematics Coordinator here at the Virginia Department of Education. I'm joined today by our Director, Dr. Albin, who is in the Office of STEM and Innovation, along with Deborah DeLozier, she's a Mathematics Specialist, and Kristen Williams-Foss, who is a Mathematics and Special Education Specialist. Today, we're pleased to present the proposed Data Science Standards of Learning and Data Science Standards of Learning Curriculum Framework for your first review. Attending the meeting today are 4 of the lead Data Science Standards of Learning developers, and I'd like to have them stand and be recognized. Dr. Deborah Crawford, she's from Frederick County. Dr. Padu Seshire, he's from George Mason University. Elizabeth Busain is from Prince William County. And Anand Vasudevan is from Fairfax County. These 4 amazing folks, they have been amazing in their work. They've been joined by some other outstanding developers who've represented various K-12 divisions and organizations, along with institutes of higher education and industry. So each developer, we were very fortunate, brought a unique perspective to the whole process. And so it's been quite a pleasurable and exciting undertaking. So we live in a world which is very rich with data. The amount of data generated in the world has exploded in the past 10 years, as I'm sure you're aware, and it's increased to over 60 times the amount of data that existed just in 2010. The demand for skills for accessing and computing with data exists in all parts of society and continues to grow. Data science is an interdisciplinary field that's an intersection of mathematics, statistics, computer science, and information technology. Data science involves an inquiry-based approach to gain insights from data that can be applied to a broad range of other disciplines and domains. A data science skill set plays a large role in our everyday lives and has become a critical need across every industry. Delivery companies, for example, use data science to improve their delivery times and create higher operational efficiency. Your smartphone, by example, might require a facial recognition to unlock the home screen. That's a technology improved through the constant evolution of algorithms fueled by data. Many of the facets of society and business rely on analysis and application of the information that we get from data. The proposed Data Science Standards of Learning and Curriculum Framework, which are included as attachments A and B of your board packet, would be an addition to the current 2016 Mathematics Standards of Learning. A high school level 1 semester or a year-long mathematics course could be locally developed based on the standards and would provide an introduction to the learning principles associated with analyzing big data. The proposed Data Science Standards of Learning and Curriculum Framework are based on 4 overarching big ideas of data science. The way we visualize data helps us to communicate ideas. Data can be used to make predictions. There are ethical implications in the use of data. And through computational thinking around data, we are able to propose solutions to problems. Numerous stakeholders were consulted as the proposed data science standards of learning and curriculum framework were being developed. Along with the standards development team that included representatives from K-12 education, higher education, and business and industry, we also obtained feedback from other national K-12 data science education leaders, along with consultation with higher education staff at Virginia universities and colleges. Additional stakeholder feedback will be obtained during a public comment period and through various outreach efforts. A course in data science would be taught by a teacher endorsed in either grades 6 through 12 mathematics or computer science. A course based on the data science standards of learning is designed to be a mathematics option for students on several different post-secondary trajectories. The course could fit nicely for students who may be interested in computer science or for students interested in fields such as business or finance, for which data plays a role. Students interested in other disciplines such as social science or healthcare would find places where data science intersects with those fields as well. Pending final approval from the board, the proposed standards of learning and curriculum framework, school divisions that are interested might be able to participate in a pilot study, and that's going to be in 2022-2023. This pilot would allow teachers from divisions across the Commonwealth to receive professional development this coming summer and participate in a professional learning cohort with other teachers implementing the course next year. Resources would be developed to support those teachers in implementing that course, and those teachers would be field testing those resources as part of the pilot. The proposed timeline for implementation is included in your board packet as attachment C. The proposed process would begin with distributing the proposed data science standards of learning and curriculum framework for public review. And that would include both a virtual and an in-person public hearing. Based on feedback, the VDOE would make edits and revisions to the proposed data science standards and curriculum framework prior to bringing them back to the board for final review in April of 2022. Professional learning opportunities for teachers selected to participate in the 2022-23 pilot next summer would be followed by a pilot implementation year, and then full implementation would occur in 2023-2024. Students taking a course based on these proposed standards would be immersed in an inquiry-based learning environment that would follow a data science cycle, as you see on the slide. In the data science cycle, students first formulate questions that can be used to study data. And they acquire that data as it's related to the question. They process the data, they create a visual representation of the data, they model and analyze, and then they make predictions and they communicate their findings and solutions. Students studying data science might undertake several different types of projects on a question or problem that could be related to school or community. For example, collecting and analyzing data to create an algorithm for movie recommendations, or analyzing rideshare data in their community to project high volume time periods. Or they might study data to support earlier detection of a disease or illness. Partnering with local businesses and government organizations to study data from community questions of interest will be encouraged as part of the course. The proposed data science standards of learning and curriculum framework align very nicely with the profile of a Virginia graduate, which describes the knowledge, skills, competencies, and experiences students should attain during their K-12 education to make them life ready and prepared to succeed in the evolving economy in which we live. In a course based on the data science standards of learning, students will use critical and creative thinking to make predictions. Through their use of varied data sources, they'll look at patterns and trends that might be revealed in data. Through viewing data from an authentic community context, students might be able to collaborate with business, industry, and government to support the development of citizenship. Communication will play a key role as students communicate their conclusions and begin to build a set of skills that are vital to their post-secondary aspirations. The tenets of student learning incorporated in the proposed data science standards of learning are shown. You may observe how the various stages of the data cycle appear in these tenets, along with the goal of allowing students to choose data sets that are interesting or based on local context. Students will be exposed to data that is not just two-dimensional or easily put into a table, but also multidimensional data that can be viewed using unconventional data visualizations like heat maps or bubble charts. The focus on building data literacy skills and promoting communication are also included. Equipping students to be able to navigate a world saturated with data requires the modernization of mathematics education. What kind of mathematics do students need to learn in a 21st century world to prepare them for the future? Ensuring that students have the opportunity to leave high school with a basic understanding of how to pose questions that can be studied using data, how to visualize and interpret data, how to analyze ethical implications predicting with data, and then how to determine how data can be a catalyst for change, all support the need for adding data science to the 2016 Standards of Learning. The Virginia Department of Education is also in preliminary stages of developing high school mathematics standards of learning for mathematical modeling and financial modeling. Modernization of mathematics education will be a focus of the 2023 Mathematics Standards of Learning revisions, and we'll also have educators considering how we'll incorporate these data literacy sorts of topics into those standards as well. According to Hal Varian, who's the chief economist at Google, he says the ability to take data, to be able to understand it, to process it, to extract value from it, to visualize it, and to communicate it, that's going to be a hugely important skill in the next decades. The proposed data science standards of learning and curriculum framework are a first step in supporting more students in the Commonwealth to be better prepared for a 21st century world. The Superintendent of Public Instruction recommends that the Board of Education receive these proposed data science standards of learning and the data science standards of learning curriculum framework for first review. That's a mouthful. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions or receive any feedback that you might have.
Okay. First, before we do the questions, let me thank you for the presentation. And I'd certainly like to take a moment to thank the folks in the audience who participated in this process. It really is, not only great to have you participate, but it's very kind of you all to have taken the time to be here with us today. We certainly appreciate, the hard work you have done on this project. Yeah, first, then questions, and then we'll go. Mr. Swan.
Thank you so much for modernizing mathematics for our students. My question is, will these data science standards be incorporated within the math SOLs in the future that the students have to take in order to graduate?
So I think there's two parts to your question. One is that they will currently be just infused into the 2016 Standards of Learning. There won't be a Standards of Learning assessment associated with it. But the goal is, as we revise standards in 2023, that we'll look at a vertical articulation of data analysis that will extend across the grade levels. So this course is a great way to have kind of an end goal in mind. So as we revise the standards, we can kind of think about what skills might students need to get to a course like data science in high school.
Thank you.
Dr. Duran.
I also just want to thank you for this. I think that something many of our teachers would really appreciate well to have clear standards. I know I've seen a lot of teachers that have explored this in their classroom in their own way and are being very innovative, but to now be recognized, one, that it's a standard that we want for all students, and two, for the professional learning that's going to come for many others who are aware of the changes that are happening around data science in the quote unquote real world, right? And how do we bring that into the classroom? And I've heard many teachers hungry, like, help me to understand how I can bring that into my classroom. What resources can you provide us more resources? So I look forward as someone who's on the other hat I wear as state superintendent to be able to bring this into the district that I work with, because I think teachers really, really, really need this, want this. And our students in many ways are already thinking about science and math beyond what they experience in the classroom. They actually have been in classrooms where they actually raise their hands and say, but actually, I know that this is going on here, or this is going on there. And they bring in real world examples that our resources that we have right now don't really connect to them. So this also, I think, will excite more students. And so I really just want to thank you and everyone here as well for bringing this forward to make this a standard that all of our classrooms and K-12, the connection to math. And moving forward, I would love to see how we have this, as Mr. Swan said, in assessments, performance-based assessments, hopefully, to see, because I think this is an area that really relates to more performance-based assessments to see how students are able to master through a project. You talked about being able to identify a potential disease. I mean, imagine whatever we could ask our students to do to help us think forward about some of the advances in science and then use that informative assessment. So a lot of potential here, but thank you for thus far where you brought us. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Dr. Duran. Appreciate it.
Colton?
Yes, I'm just going to join in the thank you. I have developed a new hobby in the pandemic time of bird watching. I'm not alone. Lots of folks have jumped in. But one of the fascinating things I've learned in bird science is that over recent decades, we've developed this huge cadre of millions of citizens of scientists who are crowdsourcing information about our bird populations. And we're learning things about risks to our birds, but also we're learning about things going well, like the huge resurgence of the bald eagle throughout the James River watershed and all the watersheds of Virginia. And the kind of data analysis that is going on based on that citizen scientist crowdsourcing information is absolutely the kind of projects I can see you helping classes and students jump into. And this opportunity for experiential learning and learning connected to real world problems is just going to be a huge benefit. We've got to help our as high school students especially find high school more relevant. And this will do that. And I thank you and your colleagues for all your good work on it.
Yes, thank you. And we'd love to get the source of your bird data so we can maybe create a
Yeah,
project
Cornell.
around it. That'd be awesome.
Cornell is the king of bird data, eBird.
Dr. Wilson?
Thank you again. I do have a question. So this area is one that has just exploded in terms of sophistication, if you will, and thinking about our process for development of standards and revision of standards. We're on, I think, a 7-year cycle or something like that. And thinking about professional development for our teachers that you've spoken of. Any thoughts about what is our process for ensuring that our standards stay maybe even a step ahead or at least in step with the pace at which this area continues to change?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've actually been in touch with quite a few different national organizations that are involved in data science education, so trying to keep abreast of things that come up as we move forward. But I think it's also important to think about the technology piece of that, because this course will involve a lot of looking at data through different technology. And we look to those as being cloud-based, so they'll all be things that students could access in the classroom. It's not something that they'll have to purchase new software. But those things evolve very quickly as well. So that's the components that we'll need to stay abreast of. The advantage of having the data science standards be approved now, and then we can revise them in 2023, is we'll be able to look at these 2 years of piloting and think about, how can we continue to revise and improve. But great question.
So in a follow-up, if you don't mind, so that brings into question then, this idea of access and availability of the resources to students. Cloud-based may seem, a no-brainer to many of us, but we know that there are communities where students don't have that kind of access. So just as we're thinking about implementation, how do we help divisions perhaps bridge a gap that may exist so that this doesn't become, another situation or a situation where students who happen to be in an area have access and those who happen to live in another don't. So that's a concern that I think we should pay attention to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Mann?
I'm equally excited, and I think hearing Dr. Wilson's question prompted me to want to think about higher education and higher education in terms of teacher prep, because I feel like so much of what gets iterated happens in practice, and that's awesome for educators. But I'd also like to put a footnote around sort of what are we doing as we think about higher ed and higher ed's role as they are preparing educators to really come out with such skills, so that really the process of implementing on the ground is made a bit easier from that angle. So I'm not sure. I know we have individuals here that are part of higher ed institutions that have helped inform this work, but I can't help but wonder about sort of that other very valuable component of teacher ed programs, and how do we sort of accelerate the need for sort of those systems evolving as we are trying to evolve and modernize learning for our students.
Yeah, Dr. Mann, we've thought about that as well, and we've been meeting with teacher education representatives from higher education for the past year. We have a cohort of educators from higher ed that are looking at both teacher education recommended changes for the programs, along with thinking about are there licensure changes that might be needed as well to ensure that teachers are prepared for this sort of content. And we know that teachers, undergo a process of revision. So we would encourage, teachers to take courses that might support, the learning of the data analysis pieces that they may not be familiar with. We're looking at possibly micro-credentialing courses that could support that as well. But yes, we're trying to stay abreast of that and hopefully kind of be a little bit ahead of the game, hopefully.
Okay, Dr. Duran.
I had one question follow-up. What type of efforts have you already made and will you make to include the business community, the healthcare community, the tech space in this partnership with our teachers and the professional learning? I think this is a perfect opportunity to bring those industries into the classroom, be it internships, partnerships, training, all of that. So what's taking place thus far and what are the plans moving forward? I think this is a prime spot for that.
It is, and we were very fortunate. We actually had a data scientist that sat on our development team, and he would speak, and we would all be like, "Ooh," and then we could kind of bring it down a little bit because he was a wealth of knowledge. But he was able to kind of connect us with a lot of different businesses that we could speak to, and we certainly are thinking about the mentorship, the internship sort of piece because that's very important. And we'll continue to outreach during this first review period before final review. More deliberately to businesses and industry. But yes, it's a prime opportunity to really help make that connection for our students.
Thank you. This is a quick follow-up. I know in Northern Virginia, we have a lot of access to that, but there are other parts of the Commonwealth that do not have access to those industries in the same way. So thinking of an innovative approach or a way to make sure that all parts of our Commonwealth, all students, if you happen to live in a county or a part of the state that does not have such richness in your backyard, how do we use methods to do that via technology? Now that we've learned Zooming and all these different opportunities to bring into the classroom, I would encourage us to do that as well, because otherwise I do fear that this could be an inequity to see some students would have great access. Northern Virginia will be fine with that, but other parts not have that same level of tech space in their backyard or cyber. All these things that occur don't happen the same way across our Commonwealth. So as we develop the standards, as we develop the professional learning, as we develop the partnerships, how do we bring an innovative approach to that versus the traditional way where I know I'm in Northern Virginia, I can easily reach out and find partners that come in tomorrow. Other places won't ever be able to have that happen physically. So how do we think that forward? Just any thoughts on that?
Yes, sir. We certainly are aware of that. We've been trying to do outreach so that we have a vast demographic approach to that, speaking to regions, speaking to administrators in smaller divisions, knowing that they do have challenges in that arena. So how can we help during this pilot year, because we hope to pilot regions from across the state. That will give us a great opportunity to kind of sort through some of the possible tech issues and come up with some innovative solutions. We also, are working, in that space. I know other offices at the Virginia Department of Education are working diligently to bridge those gaps as well. And this past year certainly has been shown a need for that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, Ms. Holton.
I'm just going to reiterate, I know I'm repeating, but Dr. Mann stressed the importance of both pre-service preparation programs and in-service preparation programs. And I believe that Professor Sessier, who's worked with you all, is both, he's my George Mason University colleague. Happy to give him a shout out and a thank you for his work here. But I believe he crosses over at Mason, both the math department, and works with math ed leadership at the education school, where we're preparing the next generation of teachers. Anything we can do to help encourage training on this work in those preparation programs. The teacher preparation programs are eager to be getting our teachers ready to do what we really need them to do when they get to the classroom. But it takes leadership from you all to help them know what we need them to be doing. And so I just reiterate those comments from my colleagues.
Very good. And we've been very fortunate to have him on our team. He is an amazing wealth of knowledge.
Okay, so nobody feels left out. We've been very fortunate to have all of you on the team.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I think that's it for questions and comments. I'd like to thank you again for the presentation. It's, always refreshing to have people excited about the work that they're doing, and it's reflected here. So thank you. The board is happy to take this on first review. Okay, item K, first review of proposed 2022 driver education standards of learning. Dr. Alvin. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, President Gecker, Vice President Wilson, Superintendent Lane, and esteemed members of the Board of Education. My name is Brendan Albon, and I'm the Director of the Office of STEM and Innovation at the Virginia Department of Education. Joining me today is Mr. Michael Bowling, Assistant Superintendent of Learning and Innovation, and Driver Education Specialists, Ms. Janet Ragland and Ms. Jerry Douglas. Today, we are delighted to present to you the proposed driver education standards of learning for first review. The Code of Virginia requires that the Board of Education shall establish the review and revision process for the standards of learning in all subjects, at least once every 7 years. The last such revision for driver's ed occurred in 2015. Thus, a need for the review and approval of driver education standards for 2022. The proposed 2022 driver education standards of learning were developed through numerous phases of meetings convened with steering and educator committee members representing all regions of the state, partner agencies, and other key stakeholders, and reflect a comprehensive and collaborative review of the standards and the expertise of diverse constituents. The proposed revisions include edits to the 2015 standards to enhance clarity, specificity, rigor, alignment of skills and content, and reflect current law and academic research and practice. The goals of the standards are to equip students with the knowledge and skills necessary to acquire an in-depth driver education content knowledge and essential driving skills, obtain a driver's license, foster responsible driving attitudes and driving behaviors that protect oneself and others, and to explore careers in the highway transportation system and the field of traffic safety. Further, the proposed revisions include an added emphasis on inculcating an attitude of safety and risk management, along with the financial responsibilities associated with the purchase or the leasing of a vehicle and the associated costs of maintenance and insurance. How the legalization in Virginia of marijuana affects driving practice. How to interact safely with law enforcement at the roadside. Understand that responsibility is shared, crashes are preventable, and that fatalities and serious injuries are unacceptable, and how advancements in active and passive vehicle occupant protection systems and intelligent vehicle handling and stability control innovations affect driving practices and influence human error. Following the presentation of the first review today, public hearings on the proposed revisions will be held in January and February. It is anticipated that this item will come to the board in March 2022 for final review. Therefore, the Superintendent of Public Instruction recommends the Board of Education receive for first review the proposed 2022 Driver Education Standards of Learning for driver education in Virginia. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you. And again, thanks for the presentation. We appreciate it and all the work you all have done on this. And I know it may not be as trendy as data science, but there are probably more drivers than data scientists. So
Very true.
we are thankful for the work you're doing. Are there any questions? I don't see any. It's amazing. So we are happy as a board to accept this on first review, and we look forward to seeing you in March after the public comment period.
Very good. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. Item L, first review of the Advisory Board on Teacher Education and Licensures recommendation for a passing score for the Praxis Middle School Math Test for Middle Education 6-8 Mathematics endorsement. Dr. Johnson,
Yes, sir.
hello.
Hello, good morning. Greetings, Dr. Gecker, board members, and Dr. Lane. If I may, I would like to group the two items that we have before you regarding the Praxis. I will present general high-level information, recommendation, allowing questions, voting, and then give you a brief overview of the second assessment that we're seeking the recommendation for today.
Dr. Johnson, would you mind just pulling the microphone closer to you?
How is that?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay. So again, I'm going to give you high-level background and methodology that will apply to both of the two assessments that we're seeking the recommendation for today. Currently, the Board of Education requires or prescribes the following assessments for initial licensure in Virginia: the VCLA, or the Virginia Communication and Literacy Assessment, Praxis Subject Assessments, and reading for the Virginia Educators, or the RVE, or specified endorsements. Today, as a result of test redesign of the mathematics series by ETS, or the Educational Testing Services, I will bring for you two recommendations for establishing or setting passing scores for the math subject assessments in middle school mathematics and mathematics, or at the secondary 6 through 12 grade levels. Overarching changes, high level, in the series include allowing additional attesting time, as well as the redesign supports a more granular report and scores, providing more feedback on performance, as well as including questions that now call for application of mathematics within teaching or instructional scenarios. As we begin to review, I'll review the middle school request first. The current Board of Education's prescribed assessment for middle school mathematics is the Praxis Middle School Mathematics Assessment Test number 5169. The proposed recommendation from the Advisory Board of Teacher Education is to set a passing score for the new Praxis Middle School Mathematics Test at 5164 for middle school education 6 through 8 endorsement. The test will be required for individuals seeking initial licensure unless exempted by holding a full and clear out-of-state license with no deficiencies, and can be taken and passed to add an endorsement in middle school 6 through 8 by individuals holding a valid renewable license. As customary, you also have the supporting documentation from ETS, including the multi-state standard setting, technical report for the new assessment, the Virginia study summary report, as well as the Praxis study companion. So I see your head shaking. The Praxis Middle School Assessment Test will replace the Praxis Middle School Mathematics Assessment 5169 test. This new assessment is designed and developed through work with practicing teachers and teacher educators to reflect the mathematics curriculum, as well as state and national standards for mathematics, including the standards for the preparation of middle-level mathematics teachers 2020 by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, the NCTM, and the Council for Accreditation of Educators, CAPE. In January 2021, a multi-set standard setting study was designed and conducted by ETS as customary to support the decision-making process for educational agencies in establishing the passing scores. Common, again, this report and design will be common for both of the assessments that we'll discuss today. Panelists from 12 states and Washington, D.C. participated on the panel. Virginia did not participate in the multi-state standard study. Instead, ETS facilitated a panel discussion with 6 Virginia educators that mirrored the multi-state standard study in April of 2021. The Virginia report reflects that the panel agreed with the recommended cut score of the multi-state study. A detailed study is contained in your documents. Again, if you take a look at the technical report, it's broken into 3 sections. You'll see the first section describes the content and the format of the test. The second section describes the standard setting procedures or methodology. And the third section presents the results of the standard setting study. As a result of this study, ETS, the Praxis Middle School mathematics test, the recommended passing score is 38 out of a possible 60 raw score points. The scale score associated with a raw score of 38 is 157 on the 100 to 200 scale. During ABTEL's October meeting, information regarding the multi-state standard setting process was presented by Mr. Malik McKinley, the Director of Client Resources at ETS. The advisory board reviewed the standard setting study report, the Virginia panel's feedback, and recommended that the board approve the passing score of 150, a -1 CSEM below the standard setting panel's recommendation. The discussion focused on the critical shortage needs in terms of math in the state, as well as because this test is being created for the first time, the need for some additional validity and reliability in terms of the test. So historically, not unlike recommendations approved by the board in the past. The Superintendent of Public Instruction recommends that the board receive the first review, the recommendation of the Advisory Board of Teacher Education and Licensure to ensure a cut score for the Praxis Middle School mathematics test. And thank you. I'll be glad to answer any questions at this time.
Dr. Wilson.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I don't see it, and maybe I'm just not cluing in the right place. What is the current score?
I'll have to look up.
I'd like to know that because just for comparison's sake would be very helpful.
And we do have it. I just don't know that off the top of my head today.
Thank you.
Making a note.
Thank you.
Sure is.
Good morning, Dr. Johnson. I'm out of my territory here, so I'm happy to defer to you and experts who know more than I on what the best cut score is. I have come to understand through some of our previous conversations and presentations and research that there are those who suggest that the Praxis, use of the Praxis altogether is not our best method for recruiting high-quality teachers in particular. There is some suggestion, if I'm correct, that it unnecessarily screens out teacher candidates of color. So as we adopt this, as we work to adopt these cut scores, continuing our current system, I'd love to have an update from you at the earliest possible convenience on where we're heading towards rethinking our whole approach to teacher licensure, in particular with respect to, is there a vision for where we can get away from the Praxis and more to experiential-based evaluation criteria for licensure? And I realize that's a big longer-term topic, but I would just love to have a glimpse as we're heading in that, glimpse to know that we're heading in that direction as we continue to do what we
Sure,
need
I
to
can-
do on the current process.
Sure, I appreciate that. Just again, as you know, I am new to this position. So that's good to hear that the board also has that same vision. I think many of our practitioners, our educators, those that are concerned about equity certainly would agree with you. And so I do believe we've got an opportunity for you, board member. I think my friend Emily is going to be sharing with you. We'll be asking if they're interested participants. We are working with, I think it's the Leadership Policy Institute. And Virginia, I have submitted an application and they've selected Virginia to be a partner in a licensure collaborative opportunity with, I think, at least 4 other states at this time. And I can't remember the states off the top of my head, but I know it's West Virginia, maybe Florida, Virginia, maybe Kentucky, not sure. But we would love to have a board member or some representation. And I also will be building a state team to include teachers, teacher educators, as well as an APTEL member. And so that will be a quarterly meeting schedule for a 12-month period starting in January. So certainly glad to hear your support of that vision and to seek your support as we look at the licensure process.
Yes.
Just had a quick question
Please.
because, of course, it was noted that in the technical report that Virginia did not participate in the panel. I know we had our own panel, but I'm always curious about sort of what goes into those decisions. As I looked at the characteristics of those that were even included in the ETS panel and the technical report, it was interesting to kind of appreciate the group that was assembled, some of whom were licensed to teach mathematics and others not. And I'm just sort of curious about when we don't participate as a part of these things, sort of what's our rationale, or if our panel mirrored the panel that was in the technical report, what can you just share about the panel? I mean, I'm just always curious to
And again,
appreciate
this was
what
prior to me being here. So high level, I can say that I believe the reason that we did not participate in this particular study was due to staff transition, really, to be honest. And so the process is ETS sends the state representatives a request for participants, and we seek participants of educators, higher ed representatives via various organizations. And then we make nominations of those individuals to ETS, and they have certain criteria for eligibility. And so they make the final selections. But as you can see, that could take several months process. And so during the staff transition, unfortunately, we lost that opportunity. And thus the request to have a separate state panel specific to this particular item.
And maybe on follow-up, not today, it would just be interesting to know the sort of demographic characteristics. I'm just always interested in that, especially since they published their own sort of overview of who was selected to participate in that process.
Sure. Can certainly do that.
Thank you.
Dr. Johnson, is there any work that's been done sort of correlating Praxis scores to effectiveness in teaching? And the reason I ask,
that has been a
it's
question for many
difficult
years.
to talk about what the appropriate score should be independent. I mean, the product we want to produce, right, are highly educated children. And so this is, sort of one of the bars to people coming in to be teaching our kids. And, I hear some people in the business say, it just doesn't relate at all to effectiveness, but certainly there's got to be some minimum skill level that is needed to teach math.
Sure, as you know, I'm not an expert.
No,
and
you
so
are
off
certainly
the-
more expert than I am, in
So
which
off the
case.
top of my head, to be honest with you, there's not a great deal of research that would support that relation or correlation, as you specifically request, in passing the test and success as an educator in a particular content area. But unfortunately, I think what has happened is more of there is research around certain content areas and certain content of particular endorsements suggesting, right, that a certain teacher would be more effective if they have certain skills and certain knowledge, but not necessarily related to the teaching, right, or the effectiveness of that teacher.
I appreciate the distinction, but is there then a score which sort of would indicate this is the minimum? I mean, how do we know what the minimum really
Big
is?
questions for me, Dr. Gecker.
No, I don't mean to. I mean, but it, you know,
Well, I
when
think again-
when somebody just says in a vacuum,
Sure.
you know, we want to be a standard error below what, you know, what it sounds like. And frankly, when you give reasons, and I don't mean you, but when reasons are stated like, well, we just need more math teachers because there's a shortage, you don't want anybody to reach the conclusion, I hope, from those statements that we are lowering the quality of the teaching force in order to meet a quota. And I don't mean, you know, right, I mean to fill the bucket. And so I think it'll be important for me, at least, as we go through this process, to understand, you know, at what level what level do people need to be able to effectively teach? And I don't necessarily need to relate, you know, if you get a 40, then you're at this level of effectiveness and a 38 at that. But there's got to be, or I would think there would be some minimum level of knowledge needed to effectively teach math. And I guess that's what we need to be targeting. Dr. Lane.
I'm familiar with a little of this research. There are a lot of studies on this, and this is, I think, first review, right? So
Yeah,
we'll have an
this is-
opportunity to bring back some data next month, and Jen can do a summary. But in the subject areas where content knowledge is highly important, the praxis can have a little bit more predictive validity. So as an example, mathematics, as you just suggested, is the subject area where content knowledge is extremely important to being able to actually teach it. In other subject areas where the content knowledge is more on a continuum, like say reading, the praxis may be a little less predictive. And so essentially what the research would say is you want to set the cut score to a point where you can ensure that teachers have the content knowledge, but it will not predict all of the facets that are necessary to be a successful teacher, like classroom management, rapport with students, so on and so forth. But I think the key as you focus on praxis is to assess as a board, what is the content knowledge that we feel like is necessary for them to be successful? And that's why math is one that is worthy of additional time. Interestingly, I found a study as I was reading about this a couple weeks ago that higher praxis scores amongst teacher mentors actually led to higher predictive validity of the teachers they worked with.
I'm sorry, repeat that, please.
Higher praxis scores amongst the teacher mentors led to higher outcomes for the teachers that they mentor. A million things.
Experience, yeah, because there are all those
Other
other
variables.
factors that go into selecting the mentor or assigning a mentor. So
Right.
curious.
So I guess between now and when this comes back, if we could ask the department to do a review of the literature on this so that we're not just dartboarding, a number.
Sure. And there's, in the multi-state standard test, they also share various other states' cut scores, so you have some context there as well. So that is included in what you do have. But we're glad to do that for you as we look towards the future and how we could expand what we could use to document content and skill levels. And we've done some research, both ETS and Pearson both have portfolios of some performance. I heard someone mention performance also. They have several performance assessments for some content areas, and not all. And that's something else that we may want to consider, right? But they're also more expensive, being honest with you. Some of you may be familiar with ETPA. Other states require different standards in terms of their assessments, but they're more expensive. And so we in the state typically have not looked at those because that is even more expensive for those going into the profession. And there's like a suite of assessments that usually go along with those performance assessments. So just a little information there.
Anybody else? If not, thank you. We will take this on first review. I know you talked at the beginning about sort of the broad overview for both topics. Do you want to also discuss item M?
Yes.
Okay.
So our discussion Of course, I've taken no notes regarding the general concerns about the Praxis overall. So now I'll highlight items specific to the secondary mathematics Praxis test. The board prescribes the Praxis subject assessment as a professional teacher's assessment requirement for initial licensure in Virginia. The current Board of Education's prescribed assessment for mathematics is the Praxis Mathematics Content Knowledge 5161. The Praxis Mathematics 5165 test will replace the Praxis Mathematics Content Test 5161. This test will be required for individuals seeking initial licensure, again, unless exempted by holding a full license, and can be taken and passed to add an additional add-on in mathematics by individuals holding a valid license. Again, the same procedures were used for the establishment in terms of method process for the standard setting by ETS, as well as the state separate panel. Again, all additional information that you have with you in your consideration for today. ETS provided a recommended passing score for the multi-state standard setting study to help educational agencies determine an appropriate passing score. For the Praxis math test, the recommended pass score is 39 out of a possible 60 raw score points. The scale score associated with a raw score of 39 is 158 on the 100 to 200 scale. During ABTEL's recent meeting in October, information regarding the multi-state standards setting process was presented again by our client representative, Mr. McKinley. The advisory board members reviewed the standard setting report as well as the Virginia panel's recommendations and would recommend that the board approve the passing score of 152. Again, a minus one CSME below the standard setting panel recommendation. In conclusion, the Superintendent of Public Instruction recommends that the Board of Education receive for first review the recommendation of the Advisory Board of Teacher Education and Licensure to establish a cut score for the Praxis math tests, 5165. And at this time, thank you, and I'm open for any additional questions.
Yeah, are there any additional questions? Because I think the same ones apply obviously to this as they did to the previous item. Thank you very much, Dr. Johnson. We will take this on first review.
Thank you.
Item N, first review of fast-track regulatory action to strike component and align regulatory language with federal requirements.
Yes, President Gecker, Vice President Wilson, members of the board, Dr. Lane. My name is Jim Chapman. I'm the regulatory and legal coordinator here with the department. I'd like to begin by thanking you for your time and service of this board. The work you do here is incredibly important to parents like me. Speaking of your time, I sure hope not to take much of it today. This is the last item on this section. I think we can bring this home fairly quickly. You might recall during the 2021 special session, the Virginia General Assembly directed the board to amend 8 VAC 20-81-170 to remove the word component from a couple of, following the word evaluation from a few subsections. At its meeting on September 23rd, the board approved an exempt action to amend the regulation as required. However, our friends at the General Assembly did not strike similar language from a subsection in the same regulation. And so that would have been inappropriate for that exempt action. So this is, we're bringing before you a fast track item, which as you'll recall, the standard for such an action is that the change be non-controversial. All we're looking to do is amend this regulation in accordance with what we think the intent was of the previous legislative action. And as long as we have the regulation open, there are a couple of small spots where we think we can bring our language into align better with the Code of Federal Regulations on the same topic. Consistent with the superintendent's recommendation, we are requesting that the board waive first review and approve this fast track regulatory action.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments? Is there a motion to waive first review and adopt the item?
President Gecker, I move to waive first review and adopt the item as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Dr. Duran. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No, that carries. And Mr. Chapman, I would also, aside from thanking you for that item, I did receive, the board has not yet fully received this, the work you did outlining everything we've got to do. The spreadsheet, some of you may know that I've asked for a couple of years now for really a compendium of the board's obligations, statutory, constitutionally, and regulatory. And I believe that you have been deeply involved in that work. I appreciate it greatly. So
It's my pleasure.
we'll be passing that out shortly.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that actually covers everything except item O, which you guys can read. And any discussion of current issues? I'm not seeing any.
Mr. President, if I may.
Yes.
I'd just like to thank you for so gracefully engaging with the public during the public comment period today. And I'd like to thank the public who came forward both today and submitted items to us in writing. And we do read those and pay attention to them. I would commend the public for bringing forward concerns and thoughts and passions in a civil manner, which everybody here has done so gracefully today. I particularly appreciate you engaging on the HB 1090 issue, the vaccine issue with respect to public school children. I think because of your engagement, and then I've been looking up that bill number on the web while we've been chatting, and as I understand it, the legislature did in early 2020, before the pandemic, before the American wave of the pandemic anyway, passed some legislation that altered the language about the Board of Health's requirements for vaccinations, but did not change fundamentally that that's a Board of Health responsibility. There was apparently some language in that bill requiring a report on the effectiveness of childhood vaccinations in schools that the Department of Education, not the Board of Education, is party to that report, which simply is a report to the legislature. And I thought that was worth clarifying because the public doesn't always understand the difference between the Department of Education and the Board of Education. But even that reporting requirement is simply a report that I believe the department will be joining the Board of Health, the Department of Health, in that will go to the legislature in upcoming months. But I appreciate the fact that the speaker from Chesterfield, who you invited back up to the podium, was able to help clarify. And I think it's worth raising it up because while I appreciate all that excellent passion, all the passion, I should say, and folks sharing their views, it's so important for all of us to try to share it based on information, not misinformation. And that as she pointed out, there was something flying around that had misinformation about our role on the Board of Education on this topic. And with just a little bit of checking, folks we can help tamp that down and help folks move forward based on real information rather than misinformation. And I think that, Mr. President, your remarks really helped on that and invite everybody to go forward in that spirit.
Thank you. Anybody, Dr. Mann?
I appreciate that comment, and I actually think it can be very difficult to really understand the scope of what our powers and authorities are, and we are here. And my invitation for Dr. Sale to really unpack, to make certain that the public always knows and understands where it has voice and opportunity to really engage on issues that are very important. Our efforts to be explicit about those opportunities, I think, is important, and it helps to sort of demystify some of what one might imagine falls within the purview of the board that may not. And I do think it's important to support educating so that people can be involved and engaged in ways that really can affect change. So I do appreciate the fact that you clarified that.
Anybody else? If not, I will just say, since we're talking about this on the live stream, I guess, that, you all know it is my view that this board ought to step heavily into those areas that have been allocated to us, either by constitution or by statute, and stay away from those things that have not been. And I think we're trying to do that, educating not only the public, but also the board at times, what our rights and responsibilities are, is challenging because we appear in so many different and sometimes unforeseen places in the code. I mean, the constitutional issue is clear, but the rest aren't. And as I was just mentioning to Mr. Chapman, I think as that list gets refined, it will give some clarity to both the board and to the public as to what it is we do here and, the appropriate role for the Board of Education versus the legislature versus the executive branch, which is VDOE, et cetera. So thank you all for participating in that. I know it was a breach from our normal process, but I'm glad it was acceptable to the board. And with that, seeing nothing else, we are adjourned. Happy New Year.